Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 75 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dranos, joined by Tettles and Trell. And this week we have special guests from World First Guild, Complexity Limit. Welcome, Taggz and Xyronic.
Happy to be here.
Woo!
Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to chat and everybody who, of course, we didn't make an episode for the last 2 weeks because we were busy with World First. And it ended up going to Complexity Limit in a very close race this time around. A lot has happened since our last show. Our last show was 3 weeks ago. Mythic came out and was cleared. Holidays happened. There's been a lot of Mythic Plus going on, a lot of all that kind of stuff. We'll talk more about the Mythic Plus parts of the game in probably next episode, if I had to guess. But this week we're going to focus on the Race to World First because we have Taggz and Xyronic here. So let's start off by introducing our guests. Taggz, what is it that you do for Complexity Limit?
I'm the water boy.
Ooh. You're the mage? You make the food? Right.
No. Cheerleader, water boy. I read off the list.
Okay.
And I'm just kind of in the background.
So you're like a backup quarterback. Do you carry a clipboard around?
Yeah, I've been compared to Rex Ryan, but I like the backup quarterback analogy too. So maybe I'm Nick Foles, I think. Mm-hmm.
He's being modest. He does healer cooldown stuff.
Yeah, that's reading off the list. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The Devo, the Spirit Link, whatever. Call that stuff out.
But yeah, no, I've been around since Limit was formed, kind of in the background, kind of in and out of the game. I had a few quitting stints. But yeah, I'm back.
You can't quit WoW, man.
Yeah, it's impossible. Hiatuses, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Zyra, how about you? Of course, we've had you on the show before, I think, but welcome once again. How was this tier for you? What were you playing this tier?
It was actually probably one of the better tiers I've played in. Yeah, played Warlock. Usually what I always play, unless there's some ridiculous bottom class that I can play. So, yeah, had fun.
And this time around, so yeah, we had Castle Nathria. I think expectations were very high coming into this raid. As the first of Shadowlands, I think from raid testing in particular, everybody was pretty excited about most of these fights. Did that end up panning out for you guys? Did you end up having a good time on most of these fights?
Yeah, I would say the difficulty curve was definitely ideal. I think that's where we would prefer every raid to be. You know, like 7 out of 10 on the first day is pretty typical. I mean, some of the earlier bosses were great though, so it's definitely better than having like a wall on the third or fourth boss, which usually isn't that fun. But yeah, in terms of the difficulty, I know people are looking at generals as being like a lot harder than the last boss, but I mean, yes, objectively, but kind of for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, a lot of that was like spell queuing and bugs that have largely been fixed at this point, right? So for guilds that are just now getting to Stone Legion generals, it shouldn't be that much harder than Sire. But it is weird that it's harder than Sire.
Yeah, and also though, if you're just looking at pull counts, like if generals wasn't so glitchy bugged, you know, say Echo and us killed on like a Friday, we would have had over 200 pulls on that boss because we would have just smashed our faces into it the first week when it wasn't really possible, like gear wise.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, a lot of times like the pull counts are pretty artificial,
right? Because you did almost all of your Sire pulls with week 2 gear, and that was when it was like a lot more. The DPS check was a lot less. Yeah,
we would have wiped in P3 like 80 times the first week, if not for that.
How did gearing actually end up feeling like coming into this expansion? Because obviously there was like a lot that has changed with corruption being removed, Titanforging being removed, and now like loot density is just lower. Was it really noticeable coming into the raid how everybody felt gear wise?
I wouldn't say so much. It was definitely noticeable once we got into the Mythic raid how scarce like Mythic raid loot was, and then also in the heroic splits during Mythic week, like how they actually wanted heroic loot to be, because we were getting the old heroic loot rates during the first heroic week. But for the most part, I think a lot of that was counterbalanced by people doing PvP and filling in the slots that they needed with just like, you know, rival or duelist level gear. So I think like our general item level, like sort of half heroic, half mythic, is typically where you're going to see people be around week 2 of mythic.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have 4 auction house BOE 226s on every slot
okay.
as well.
For
That's
us,
a pretty big difference.
For
That's
us, it was
that's
pretty
like 4
typical.
weeks of vault. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have 1 piece from Mythic Raid currently, and was this the 4th week of Mythic being out?
Yeah, I have 1 Mythic Raid piece and then 1 Great Vault Mythic Raid piece and 4 auction house BOEs. And
I have 2 PvP pieces and then just fucking a Great Vault stuff and 1 raid piece.
The PvP pieces are they're actually so ideal as well, because you're not only are you choose this, like if the stats are good for you, that's great. They're all verse heavy, but like you can usually choose the secondary that you want on top of that. But also you can just buy them in whichever slot is your lowest item level. And so like I don't know, I feel like every single player, I don't know, how many of your players were PvPing in previous patches for gear? I guess most of them as well, right?
Definitely everyone, but I think we got more people pushing higher this time. Like a lot of times people would stop at 1800. And actually like with all those, like the PvP and the vault gearing, I think I think at least for us, you get more gear like per week than previous tiers, which going into it, we didn't really, I mean, obviously someone could have like predicted that, but everyone kind of saw the reduced raid loot and was like, oh, okay, everyone's going to have less loot. But I think it was actually the opposite because of all the piece targeting. Like you're never going to get a bad piece out of your vault. I mean, you could, but, or like PvP piece targeting. Whereas before, you know, you did all your weekly stuff to get something out of your chest. And
yeah, both your PvP box and your M plus box could just have like a belt in them, and you're just sitting there like, man.
The target gear is absolutely better, for sure.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole discussion, but I would love to see that Mythic Plus. I think Cyro tweeted about the other day specifically about that. I think a lot of people would like to see that system continue in PvP and Mythic Plus, or have multiple ways to do it.
Yeah, I think that there's like basically every part of the game right now has some great stuff and some sketch stuff about their loot, right? Like PvP has these great items you can target, but like the rest of your items are all 184 if you're just PvPing and you're just getting farmed by the PvEers in threes if you're trying to be a PvP only person. Like if you're an M plus only person, all your items are 210 and the PvPers' best items are 226. You're just like, man.
It's always great queuing into the arena whenever you have 35,000 health and you queue into somebody who has 26k and you're like,
I'd like to introduce you to my Star Surge.
I do multiple branches of content.
16,000 crit Star Surge? All right, yeah, that's about 2 of those? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, PvP, I mean, the matches are so fast right now as well, which is making gearing so quick from it too, right? Because the matches are just 1 minute.
Yeah.
The other new expansion systems were also relevant, of course, this time around. We were talking a little bit on the pre-show about it with Covenants, but you guys had some Covenant swaps even between weeks 1 and week 2. Sorry, you got a face on there. How did you feel the Covenant system felt for World First progression?
So I think a lot of our initial concerns with the Covenant system from beta were for the most part like fixed by pretty much making them not that big of a deal for most classes. Except for one, Tettles. You wanna cover that one for us?
Dude, your Mookin, that's not my fault.
I want to know where they got it from.
Your no.
Who told them?
They told us.
Or they read it. Yeah, but it has to come from somewhere. They're not
so
the numbers themselves.
Yeah, okay, so we were all looking at the number. All right, so basically the problem is that all the Moonkins went fucking Kyrian, and Kyrian was actually just a trap in raid. And so what we were looking at is that that Night Fae was only 4% ahead on Patrick's single target, and it is only 4% ahead. That's like actually correct. The problem is that that burst single target damage is so overwhelmingly stupid that it doesn't matter that it's only 4% ahead. That you'd rather have the burst profile, and then it's like Kyrian was like hard to play around, and maybe it wasn't only 4% ahead because you would lose some damage value in some aspects. And then one thing leads into another, and it's like, oh, this is actually, we've just baited the shit out of everybody into going fucking Kyrian for raid. Now Night Fae's better. But Kyrian is still good at what it's good at. I don't know.
Not to mention the residual effect of having to actually do mission board as a Kyrian instead of a Night Fae.
Dude,
you didn't do this.
It was actually so bad doing doing the Kyrian mission boards.
Kyrian missions suck.
I cannot overstate just how impossible those are. If Soul Ash actually mattered as a currency, like you were actually getting way more as a Fae or Necrolord.
It actually did matter on week 2 of Mythic progression. You couldn't craft a rank 4 legendary without having at least one Soul Ash mission done on your mission board.
By
So
that time,
all
though,
of our Kyrians couldn't get it.
Lost it.
you could do that as a Kyrian on that week. It was
Yeah,
doable.
they didn't know the technique though.
Yeah, you needed the
Thanks
sauce.
through the level 20 mission.
Oh no.
We had to use the phalanx.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
You can subscribe to my Patreon if you want the strategy.
I thought you were gonna say the
That's what Taggz brings to the table. He brings detailed guides. He reads off the chartboard, and he's like, "All right, so for this mission table, you think that you may end up wanting this, but you really want the phalanx, and that is the secret technique brought to you by me."
Well, the fact it just looks so underpowered, but it's got so much health, and it gives the 10% DR to 3 of your guys. Now, it doesn't sound that strong compared to the Fae troops, but you know, it's better than your stupid champions as a
that would be
Kyrian.
correct.
Yeah.
All you do is Dreamweaver and Trappers.
Yeah, Dreamweaver 4 Trappers beats like every single mission in the game. It's wild. Do you know that I'm not gonna talk? We'll not talk about the mission table. That's enough time for mission table. Let's talk about some other Shadowland systems because we're gonna run out of time if you let me start talking about the mission table. The conduits, the soulbinds, the legendaries, did all that end up working out just how you guys expected, or was there any weird stuff going on? Any fun stories to tell about any of those systems? Any legendary mishaps? Anybody build the wrong legendary?
They might have and just didn't tell anyone.
Okay.
Hard to know. Like these moonkins.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
built the wrong legendary. They didn't build the wrong legendary.
This anecdote I said in the pre-show, but I'll share with everyone that we heard pieces say that they had a moonkin accidentally go Kyrian, and now that bricked that character. And this was while our moonkin were still Kyrian. And when we heard that, we said, why do they think that character's dead? Why do they think that character's unusable? But that's what you guys are doing on purpose. And then, 4 days later, they swapped to Knife. So that was when the wheels started turning. That maybe they picked something wrong. But I don't know of any legendary mishaps besides what we just said that our tanks didn't get rank 4 because they were Kyrian.
I remember actually, I think Dryny forgot to put something other than haste on his legendary.
Oh
yeah.
no.
So
Dryny
he had the wrong stats.
Dryny did not put his best stat on his legendary.
Interesting. How did you guys feel about the world bosses dropping legendaries that were relevant for progress?
I think that's the only other mishap from this tier was the fact that there were a couple classes. I think it was Unholy DK and Ellie Shaman that couldn't get their best legendary until week 3 or 4 of the raid being out, which is only going to be an issue for this raid tier, right? So it's not going to be an issue for future progression tiers, but I think that's just a really weird oversight.
Yeah, apparently the DKs only lost cleave, but their single target, it wasn't that striking. Apparently.
Yeah. That might have been relevant for Stoneleech and Generals, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Ellie just finally got their Abyss Legendary, right?
Yeah, they got their Abyss
week.
Legendary this week. Which is wild.
Feels bad.
I don't expect that we would have seen Elemental Shaman in that raid, even if they had it, but maybe. It's definitely not the kicking them while they're down that they needed.
I don't want to get off on this tangent, but why the hell is Torghast also in a random rotation?
It doesn't matter because all the wings were available before Mythic.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of weird in general that it is a random rotation, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think it matters too much.
It's not too bad unless you miss on your ult that you're trying to gear up a couple weeks in or something, I guess.
Yeah, that's the only.
Well, some of the wings are way harder or more annoying than the others, but ever since they nerfed them, none of them are really bad anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the BOE aspect of this, because a lot of players are shelling out a couple million gold buying 226s this time around. You guys took it a step further, and not only were you looking for 226 BOEs in every slot, but you were also looking for Avoidance or Leech on almost all those pieces. How did you guys coordinate that effort? How much did it cost? And do you have thoughts about the BOE meta?
Oh, we spent 330 million, which is more than last time, but I would expect that number to go down. Just because we were spending a lot of we like bought the first couple mythic BOEs that appeared anywhere for like an outrageous premium, and then we realized that they were dropping like crazy.
Yeah, people were running
True.
actual BOE farm groups. I've done this. I've spent several off nights now in Mythic Castle Nathria. You do like a trash clear. You collect like 5 million gold across your whole raid, or 10 million gold across your whole raid, and then you hearth out and come back 30 minutes later. You do a key or whatever, you come back 30 minutes later. And
That's how
it's really good
Dragnus
gold.
is trying to justify overtime rating right now. He said
It's off night, optional. You know, if we happen to pull a boss by accident because it's right there, how could you blame us? Sun King Salvation, it just looks like trash mobs. You walk into that room and you're like, oh, let's pull some trash, and you accidentally kill a boss. It's not our fault. We didn't actually do that this tier, but we've disguised progression as BOE farming off nights before.
Nice.
But yeah, it's definitely a weird thing. It's weird how much more rewarding it is to kill trash than bosses in Castle Nathria in terms of like items per hour.
Yeah, it actually is. And so, yeah, the first wave of BOEs we bought were just way overpriced, and then they started coming down, but still not to where they should have been based on like supply. It was because people knew that we were paying 2 million, 3 million, 4 million a BOE. But if we didn't exist, those prices would plummet on the auction house because nobody actually is buying those besides us because we need them that minute. So it's artificially high, and like a lot of these BOE farming groups were running and then just like whispering us and only us, which is cool and nice, but like I feel like we should get a discount then. But you know.
Well, you should be able to play. You should be able to pay market rate instead of a premium, since they're only.
Well,
whispering.
that's the thing. We don't know what the market rate is, right? Because it's a completely unregulated free auction house, right?
Yeah, and like you do need them right then, so you can't just lowball the shit out of them, tell them to go put it on the auction house, wait for them to realize after a week that they can't sell it at that price, and then
yeah. So it's artificially high. Like we should, you know, it shouldn't be 330 million gold spent, but because of the time frame, it has to be. So now we're in deep debt.
Yeah, you and Echo both spent about that much gold. Pieces came into this tier with 500 million saved up. Do you guys hear about this?
Rich. They have the most gold of any guild, pretty much.
They had like a quota for their raiders to like do sales and put money into the guild bank every week, which is
awful. Yeah, that sounds awful.
I mean, it sounds nice as well because then you avoid being in debt after the tier as well. But
how are you guys getting sales now that Galley's dead?
Same way as before, really. Just you know, some verification that they're not like the problem has always been middlemen, like posing as buyers, and they're actually selling this service to a person for real money, right? Yeah. That's the problem, because we only can and only want to do gold sales, and so it just depends on the perceived sketchiness of buyers, like some sort of verification that it's actually the buyer giving us the gold and not like middlemen. That's the problem, right? So sometimes you find like reliable people who are actually reliable, and you can get more and more buyers through them. But I mean, it's more difficult.
Yeah, right? It's tough because at the end of the day, even if they start off like that, if they then build up like an organization around them, and then they're just looking at the numbers, then like, man, I could sell all this gold for $20,000 and pay rent for a couple months, for a couple of years. That starts to be a very enticing proposition.
Happens to the best of us.
Does happen, yeah. I don't know. It's really tough because I'm not sure if a lot of people know this, but like people have gotten banned for receiving gold that was bought, right? That's something that's happened to you guys before.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Even with like even if you have no idea that there was any money ever changing hands.
I mean, honestly, like notably got their whole entire guild banned for like 2 people in that guild accepting real money, and then like the rest were just accepting gold, and they didn't have any idea that the 2 people were accepting money, and there's just like 25 people got banned out of a sale, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, it's tough. You wish there was some kind of like I don't know, like the same way they do the WoW token, there should be a way that Blizzard like verifies, they put a blue check mark next to some gold when you take it in the trade.
I don't want Blizzard to
Verified gold.
There should be like a blockchain for where the golds come from, and you can look through all the transaction history and be like, yes,
it's organically farmed.
Yeah, this gold dropped from this lion over in Bastion, and then it was traded twice, and now here it is.
Max source. Yeah.
Yeah.
The blockchain
Like gold trail.
Gold.
Yeah.
That would actually be hilarious.
Okay, so Xyro, this tier you were rating from home. Last year you were rating from the place, the GameStop Performance Center. How different was it going back to home, and are you looking forward to going back at some point in the future to rating with your buds?
To be honest with you, the only major difference is the thing that we've talked about in the past, like the fact that it's a lot more difficult to talk about strategies on breaks, because that's the major benefit of being at the GSPC, is that once we're on break, we can still talk about it together because everyone's there in person. We did miss a little bit of that this time around, but to be honest, rating from home wasn't that big of a deal. Like, I've got a pretty cool setup here, so it was fine for me.
Yeah, is that extra toasty Cheez-Its I see in your background there?
No, these are, hold on. I still have like the snack setup from Progression here.
Is that just
cheddar jack.
Okay. I've been having extra
very
toasty
nice.
Cheez-Its. Those have been
Extra toasty is the way.
extremely yummy, yes.
I mean, one of the bigger problems is like the internet issues. Like Twisted had major internet problems during Prague to the point where he got benched on Sludgefest, right?
Is that what happened? I don't
Oh,
remember.
he had a planned outage for like 10 hours.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah,
man.
that's definitely an impact.
Yep.
I think I was talking to Goop the other day about this too, and he said some breaks weren't like cleanly started or ended because of the different stuff going on in people's lives, outside of the internet. I think a lot of that is solved by being in one place together as a team, and also some of the hype is missed when a boss finally goes down and not everyone's in the same room, the pit, screaming about it. I think that's pretty cool for the Raiders.
That was definitely, dude, that was something I remember. Just like, 2 seconds, there was like a 2-second delay between what we were casting and what we were seeing, but like there was just like an earthquake that you could feel when the boss died. Everybody just started yelling from 40 feet away or whatever. I don't know. It was still pretty hype though this time. I think this time around, the race being a lot closer made it a really exciting finish too. I mean, this was a really impressive tier, right? There was the Echo. There was the off-stream thing. How do you guys feel about this? So there's this drama that, of course, like almost all World First drama, it's one of these things where the Raiders will basically tell you, chill, and the Twitch chat will just be losing their minds. So I don't know. Do you have any words on any of the 16-hour drama, the off-stream drama, the council kill off-stream? Any takes on that, or do you want to just move on? I'm happy either way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, so the 16 hours thing is the same as it's always been, right? That's not a new story.
Right, but this time it was the closest it ever came to being within the 16-hour range. This tier was decided by 16 and a half hours, and let me tell you, if that was 15 and a half hours, there would be a lot of...
I wish it was decided by like 5 hours.
Yeah, I just want to watch the world burn. Yeah.
I want to see the drama. So that's what we all want too, is that like 3 hours apart kill. That would be the best. But yeah, no, like the argument surrounding 16 hours has been waged forever and ever. So you could go back to 2012 and read someone's dissertation on MMO Champion about it. The streaming stuff.
Dissertation.
Yep. The streaming stuff, again, like you said, you already know the answer. It doesn't really matter to us that much, like what they're doing. And from their perspective, it totally made sense. So like I can defend that. Like being in their shoes. I mean, because this is coming from a guild that didn't stream Uldir and Jaina, right? Like that.
Right.
I was a huge voice in that room saying we shouldn't stream. Like I still don't really like streaming, but I'm now the minority on that. So, but like, yeah, I mean, it's the streaming of the race comes second to actually winning in everyone that's actually partaking in its eyes. To some people, that's not the case, and the community tries to, or some people when they're arguing about it on Reddit, like try to turn it into something it's not. But it's just a bunch of guilds that have always been racing for a world first that are now streaming it. Because, you know, it used to be that the top guild streaming was like world 15th or something, and it was like that for a while.
Me. Yeah, it baffles me that people feel so entitled to being able to get this content like for free as well, and like.
I mean, I understand wanting to, like, you know, if you want to support a guild that like streams while they're ahead, you know, I think it's reasonable to support those guilds, right? And like,
yeah,
Echo streamed only when they were behind, right? And they turned off streams when they were ahead, which like it made sense from a perspective of winning the race, but it didn't make sense if you were a viewer and you wanted to watch them win the race, right? If you wanted to be rooting for a team that was streaming, I understand being disappointed about that, but yeah, I mean, obviously, like talking about how they were, you know, being evil or whatever, like they're just doing their thing, right? They're trying to win.
Yeah, and also the thing that you have to look at as well is we did it too.
Right.
We did it on Council of Blood, and that actually probably saved us like several hours because we killed Council of Blood in like 2 hours, and it took them something like 7 or 8. So
they had the wrong strat for that boss, right?
Yeah, they had the wrong strat completely.
They were killing the Dancing Fools for most of progression, which was not anything close to what you guys did. So yeah, I mean, I definitely, it's weird because there's this like long-term, short-term element where like long-term, if you want to be competitive for World First next tier, you want to be like a big streaming org, right? You want to get all that money, you want to be able to pay your raiders. But short-term, any given tier, you want to just turn off your streams, right? And just dunk. So it's, I mean, definitely balanced.
The only takeaway that I would like, I don't know, vibe with is if someone really likes Echo and to them turning off their stream sucked, and you know, it's your prerogative to not support them anymore, or like not support us because we killed a boss off stream. Like, but for like fans of the opposite team to like lambast the other one for like turning off the stream for some advantage, that's weird. Like, just chill out. Like the stance that we've always had on streaming was that if you have to copy someone, then you're behind. You can't copy someone you're ahead of. So if you're copying someone's strat, you're just catching up quicker, but you're not going to slingshot them. You're not passing them from copying them. So that's why we didn't consider turning off our streams this tier when Echo did, because, well, if they're ahead of us, then what are they gaining from watching us? And if we're ahead of them, then, you know, at most they gain is just catching up. And so we don't know if they were ahead or behind us. Apparently they were ahead of us on the reset, but it doesn't matter either way in our calculation, right? And it's different. Like I said, I totally understand why they did what they did. And if I was in their shoes, I mean, it would be a great reason to shut off the streams, right? But for the average commenter, I think it's not that serious.
Yeah, the like partisans on both sides. I don't know, man. All I've ever thought whenever I've seen Twitch chat is like, man, I wish the people I agreed with were chill. We're chill about this more.
There's also the 16-hour advantage shit that people squawk about too, and it's like, oh, this is not a real race.
Yeah.
How would you feel if people who were racing cars started with a 16-hour disadvantage on the or like the Tour de France started with a 16-hour disadvantage for one of the cyclists?
The Tour de France, the renowned car race, yes.
Yeah, well, okay. They use that. There's literally everything. What if the 100-meter sprint somebody started with a 4-second disadvantage? You're like, all right.
I think this is something that's been gone over pretty much every tier since the two guilds have been kind of, you know, competing with each other. But for the most part, between the raiders of both guilds, there's a certain amount of respect and, you know, appreciation for what both guilds do and how good they are. And most of the hostility tends to come from the Twitch chat fans of both guilds rather than the raiders themselves. So people just need to chill out.
There's this weird, like...
That's really all there is to it.
You get baited in responding to somebody dumb in Twitch chat, and then you get clipped. And then then somebody on their team watches that and doesn't know the context, and they're like, man, this guy's a jerk. And it all spirals, man. But that didn't happen this tier. I mean, this tier is, I think almost everybody on both sides was really, I think, just impressed by the level of play. Because the level of play, like, even going back to mid-BFA, it's tough to imagine like Jaina surviving the first reset. You know, if you guys have been playing like this, Gahoon surviving the first reset, any of that. I think we would have seen a lot of 1 week tiers at this level of play in BFA. let's talk a little bit about some of the specs this raid, because I think there was a lot of changes in what people thought was going to be good. So I want to single out some underperformers and some overperformers. We got specs like Frost Mage, Shadow Priest that I think people were expecting to see quite a lot of this tier. Shadow Priest we saw some of, Frost Mage we saw almost none of. Did that come as a surprise to you guys as well, or were you kind of expecting that also?
No, so we thought Frost was going to be something, and it kept changing. They kept changing Mage, like in small increments. Like one of them, for example, I don't know if it got much play publicly, but it was something that we were planning on heavily. Was this Frost Mage Legendary, that the Frost Nova one, and that worked. Like that was going to work on generals, and then they changed it to where, you know, expectedly
other people's damage still breaks it. Yeah,
and it also only ramps your own damage. On top of that, they hit it doubly. So stuff like that, like we definitely thought generals was going to be a hard fight, and we prepared a legion of Frost Mages specifically for it, because they were really good at other parts of the fight. You know, Ice Block was really good. It was even better before. So
in these, cleave,
in these like small incremental changes, slowly whittled away at the reason why Frost was going to be probably the best spec for that fight, and it ended up being nothing.
Yeah, I know you guys tried it for a couple pulls. You guys tried Havoc Demon Hunter also for a couple pulls, very briefly, and actually looked pretty good.
I think it was actually Vengeance from our pulls, but
yeah. We 3-tanked for a minute there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the state of Havoc.
I just saw Vade come in, man, and I thought he was playing Havoc. That's so unlucky.
Yeah, that spec is pretty cursed. What's another one? Oh, Rogue. There was a guild that used a Rogue, actually.
Skyline was playing 2 even for a lot of those.
Oh,
guilds.
really? I didn't watch any of Skyline, but Fat Shark Yes used one as well.
Yeah, they have. I think they're even at that level. There start to be points where like specific players also can tip the balance towards the spec.
No, definitely always it's like that, and that's why people. It's funny. People always go to Max's stream and watch the post raid like explanation of specs we used and why, and that only applies to like the top 5 guilds, really. Like I don't know how more clear you can be. Like for example, rogues versus Unholy DK is a perfect example. They're close on damage, but Unholy gives you slightly more utility, so I could totally see why a rogue would fit in a raid. And us not using a rogue is not some reason to say, oh well, rogues aren't usable. That's not it at all. We just bring 4 of what we think is the best melee, right? That's Unholy DK.
I mean, for almost all people, it's bring your best players. And
I mean, it doesn't help. I think Unholy this year has like a legitimate reaches down effect because of AMZ, right? Like AMZ is just such a breaker, so it's so big to be bringing a literal barrier compared to most melee DPS, which is I think it's completely wild that spec has that now. But I foresee that DPS Death Knights will be brought in large numbers anytime you have melee if they're reasonably close to balance because of AMZ. This expansion.
I agree.
Other than that, Warlock, Zyra, you were playing your Warlock this tier. You guys did some weird like Warlock leapfrogging strat. Warlock big brain, have one Warlock in for generals and have the other 2 gearing up outside and then bring them in for Sire. How did you feel about Warlock this year? Was it surprising to you that it was like 1 or 2 per boss, not more?
No, I think we were kind of expecting that coming in, but I still think it definitely outperformed my expectations. We did a lot of like in guild testing of specs in different scenarios before the expansion came out, so we had a better idea of which classes had good damage profiles for different scenarios. And I think Warlock was like in the bottom third for every single one of them. But the problem is we were testing at a low item level, so I think it baited myself and the other Warlocks in the guild into thinking Warlock just sucked. But once you actually got up to a heroic or mythic item level, it was fine and actually pretty good in most scenarios. Not to mention they bug fixed it like halfway through the first week of Mythic, so we got like a 2-ish% single target damage increase. And yeah, the whole leapfrogging scenario, my gear was kind of on crack after farming Mythic Plus. I mean, if you saw Sludge Fist, I just had the perfect gear for that boss. So it made sense for the other two warlocks to go just fill in all their slots for Mythic Plus while I did generals, and I'm pretty sure they're pretty happy they didn't have to do any generals progression because that boss was not fun.
Dude, something that I thought was undervalued coming into the tier, Holy Paladin seemed so bad, and then it's just Ashen Hollow Holy is unreal.
I mean, just damage, right? You just
Yeah,
get
everyone was just wrong.
Everybody was just wrong. Did you have like, did you know that Ashen Hollow Holy Paladin was going to be as good as it ended up being, Taggz?
Yeah, actually, to be fair, Dryny, Nori, I did actually start Kyrian, but only for like 2 days. What happened was we actually looked and saw what other pallies were going, and I think it was Pieces and Fetch Our Guest guys were Venthyr, and I think actually Fetch Our Guest people swapped from Venthyr to Kyrian, which they did it early enough where I mean I'm pretty sure they're back to Venthyr now maybe. But yeah, there was definitely some like early swapping, but I think we all were really high on Venthyr going into the expansion to begin with, and we just didn't want to like make the complete wrong decision. So we picked Kyrian first, as in like don't want to go against the grain too much. But yeah, I mean we were Venthyr on like day 2 or day 3 of the expansion, and that was definitely heavily featured in our plans. And I think like if I was to recommend to other pallies, I'd still recommend Kyrian. It's just if you specifically have your whole raid plan around these Ashen Hollows, then it's really strong. But in like 99% of other cases, not just in raid, but also like in Mythic Plus and other things, Kyrian is a lot better, right? So it was like people were even saying, oh, Ventyr's only good for Sire. And that was like a weird take. I don't know why that was in people's heads, but I definitely saw it a lot. But I mean, that was still kind of the thinking that it's only going to be good for certain circumstances in the raid. And, we'll go from there. But it definitely was good for more than just Sire.
Oh, dude, it does tank damage on it allows your Holy Paladins to do like 2,500 DPS on single target, like 3,000 DPS on single target, which for reference, most healers do in like the 1 to 1.5k range if they're allowed to DPS full time. Rest of shamans are sitting at like the 300 DPS range because they're probably healing most of the time. And the Holy Paladins are just sitting there like, oh yeah, I'm chilling at 3k DPS.
Yeah, well, we were also going other specs on top of just Venthyr. Like they were playing Light's Hammer and Holy Prism, which I don't know if you guys know Holy Pally, but like you don't really play those spells. So there's a lot of questions about what the pallies were doing, but it was like 100% for damage. So yeah, if you say like, why are Limits pallies using Light's Hammer and Holy Prism? I mean, it just does more damage. So that was like the entire thinking for everything, not just Venthyr versus Kyrian.
Yeah, I do think that Holy Paladin was really, really slept on coming into the tier. Now that we've seen it, how it actually ended up.
I mean, I think still for the majority of guilds, you're gonna like they're gonna struggle with HPS, but it's just like in limit, you're trying to kill this stuff with item level like 218, and everybody else is gonna have 226, and so you need to find some more damage somewhere. And Holy Paladin is the answer to that problem.
Yeah, the other thing in terms of fitting your like whole raid around something like that, it's definitely comes into play when you're planning cooldowns and stuff. And also like Shaman Mastery. If you're like limping by and everyone's at 10% health for a while, then your Shaman's getting a huge benefit from that because I believe they already Mastery stack. Sometimes they don't, but I think Mastery stacking is the move right now, so it helps even more. So that's like a lot of the planning around cooldowns is kind of like seeing the spots where you can kind of limp. And when you're doing a fight for the first time, most healers just like spam their mana bar away, just like it's definitely the move. Like you definitely just like over heal in every situation because you don't really understand where the damage is going to come next, sort of thing on the first few pulls.
You got to get the raid as far as you can into the encounter too, right? You just want to see it first.
Just YOLO, really. And later on, you can find it, kind of notice those lull points where everyone should just chill and like let the healing rain do its job and like stuff like that. So that's why in every guild, not just ours, you'll see, on pull 1 versus 50, people's mana bars are way different. People seem way more healthy, and it's because the healers are changing what they're actually like casting in each moment. Instead of spamming whatever chain heal over and over, you're just sitting there DPSing instead, because there's damage coming.
You say, and I agree, this happens in every guild. Does it happen more consciously in your guild? Are you guys talking about that kind of stuff? Is that something that you guys are coordinating? Because I know that's not that, like, I think in most guilds it is mostly a subconscious improvement.
Yeah, that's why having the healer on the bench definitely helps a lot, is I'm only looking for that sort of stuff. But like, for example, with Ashen Hollow specifically, because it's such a strong healing spell, it also overheals a lot. So when we put down Ashen Hollow, we're specifically saying, hey, every healer just DPS here, because not only do you don't have to heal, but also you're getting like a lot of mana back. If you DPS for 30 seconds, you're going to regen like 20-30% mana. Like, it's a lot. That's a long time, right? So stuff like that definitely lends itself more to Holy Pally being good, right? Just like using the strengths of classes, which is like Shaman Mastery or like, Disc Spirit Shell. That's where Pally fits in pretty well. But it's like really weak. Like, we wouldn't recommend double Holy Pally to guilds that are not on Sire yet. It's weak. It's not a good healer. It has a really bad healing profile. Like, for Kyrian, it's much better, but like, don't get baited. You don't use double Holy Pally if you're killing Sire 3 weeks from now. It's bad.
But don't worry, dude. Elismir did 25k DPS on some pull in Sanguine Depths and in Necrotic Wake whenever he Action Hollowed 10 targets.
Nice.
Dude,
I thought he was Kyrian.
Yeah,
he got forced to swap. Midwinter made him swap.
Every paladin I know has been going through
don't
this.
Get tricked. Stop making them switch to Venthyr. It's not good.
He's so sad about having to swap.
It's not for you. It's not.
He has like a red tint to his camera now and like prison bars over his camera.
I mean, I knew people were getting forced to swap Venthyr, but it's not good. It's just for what we were doing, and now we're done. Like, I'm already Kyrian again. Well, spoiler. I didn't raid, but like, I was still trying to mirror what the Pallies were doing, and I swapped for Mythic Plus. Like, the raid's over, so
we saw you come in for one split and then immediately exit after your guild wiped.
Yeah, I was like, still, I was specifically trying to trade specific pieces. Like, I got out of my vault a PvP on use or the PvP medallion. Which is probably like the worst choice for actually playing
the medallion.
No, the PvP trinket, whatever it's called.
Yeah, the one that like frees you from stuns. Yeah,
the medallion. Yeah, the one that
frees you. Yeah, I got a medallion for my.
So you could trade trinkets.
So
nice.
I can trade trinkets. Yep.
Very
Everything
cool.
for the team.
Yep.
The ultimate sacrifice.
That's what that was for. And I did. I traded with that. With that, I traded a heroic vessel. So there you go. Worked out.
Pretty cool.
That's actually a sick trade. Now you have a good item level medallion.
Yeah, exactly.
So are there any specific bosses that, of course, the first 7 going down on the first day is, I think, expected and also surprising every time for casual viewers. And I don't think it means that they were easy or anything or undertuned or whatever. A lot of those bosses took you in the 10 to 25 pull range, which is quite a lot for a normal guild. You're going to come in there and you're going to pull them 60 times or 80 times. Was there anything from those first 7 bosses that you thought was particularly cool? Like Sun King, the healer fight, was that something you guys enjoyed, or were you off it?
Yeah, Sun King's nice. Healer fights are always cool. It was very easy, but it's cool. Yeah, gives healers something to do on farm.
Xyro, how about you? Do you have any personal favorites from this tier?
I think Sludgefist was like as good a DPS check tuned fight as you can get in week 1 of Mythic. I don't know how they managed to actually make these ridiculously tightly tuned DPS check fights, like tier after tier. But Sludgefist was like probably the best DPS check I can remember in the past couple of years.
It looked perfect from a viewer standpoint too. It looked like you guys could kill it, but just barely, and that's exactly how it ended up, I think, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I mean, I've seen a lot of tweets from a lot of limit players about just how good that week 1 tuning of Sludge Fist was, which I think is really awesome to see, especially because like Sludge Fist it's a boss that for most guilds, when you get there with 10 extra item levels, it shouldn't be like impossible. So like without even having to nerf the fight, they've got it in a place where it's good for everybody, which is really cool.
I have a question. So how do you guys practice for a fight like Artificer? Like obviously the seed running is a polarizing mechanic on that fight, but it's I would argue like a lot different from heroic to mythic in terms of how you have to move the seeds. So how did you guys pre-plan like movement and stuff like that?
Well,
Go ahead.
we all jump into Discord, and Max opens MS Paint, and then he doesn't erase the lines very well when he's trying to describe something. So then there's like dashed lines all over the place. Then we pull the boss.
There you go.
That's
And
a
it worked.
proof strategy right
John
there
Madden.
too.
John Madden.
John
Yep.
Madden. That's from raid testing. So like, do you guys do this? I don't know. Do you guys like dungeon journal that and then do raid testing and then like come up with your live strat after the raid testing after trying a bunch of stuff?
Well, we do watch the beta footage a lot
Okay.
as a group. I think that's probably the thing that helps the most in terms of like visualization, because Paint doesn't. Yeah, but what was sorry, you're gonna say?
I was going to say we put in probably more prep in terms of like boss prep this tier than we have in any other tier. So we had a very good idea of what we wanted to do based off of raid testing for every boss, more so than previous tiers. So we had a lot of things planned out, and obviously you still have to learn some stuff on the fly, like the different timings in Xyro, like you're mentioning. But you know, it wasn't too difficult of a boss. You know, you could kill it with like half your raid dead on week 1 if you were just doing the mechanics properly.
Yeah, I was always impressed watching you guys like come into a room and there would be like, before you even pulled the boss, you know, you'd have the comp that you wanted for the fight already swapped to, and you had like 4 world markers down, and you just started doing the fight and it looked like you were just mid progression already, which is really impressive to see, and it obviously saves a bunch of time when you like, you know, those 7 bosses dying on day 1 isn't a guaranteed thing, right? If you came in there without that prep, I imagine you would look like a lot of guilds did, where you ended up actually taking serious time on some of those bosses to learn them.
Yeah, Warlock summoning really slowed them down too.
Oh, dude, Warlock summoning!
Warlock summoning.
Obviously, I'm saying that as like a troll, but it's also kind of serious.
That actually cost. I mean, at least it was happened to everybody, so it was fair in that regard. But like, that cost a lot of time on Mythic for a lot of guilds. The first 2 or 3 weeks not being able to summon into the raid.
Yeah, it was the worst for me actually, because I had to sit outside on the summoning stone the whole raid. I was trying to do like world quests and stuff. I'm trying to do my callings while
Trying to
they
get some
raid.
anima, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to build up my home, and they just keep saying, "Oh, you got to sit outside at the summoning stone." The warlocks are so busted, but I think the warlocks might have been lying. This might be like a big, like grand conspiracy, honestly.
Yeah, the warlocks just going on strike, unionizing, demanding to get paid for summoning people.
They're the worst rezzers. They always put down a stone and don't actually summon. It's just, I mean, they're not as bad as hunters, but. Ugh.
Did you guys notice this? There's like an alpha warlock, beta warlock relationship in every raid, where there's like one warlock that always does the summons and the health stones. And then this tier, there's only one warlock in for a lot of fights. And if it was not your like person who's used to doing that, you're just having to like wrangle them to actually make health stones and summon and stuff. I don't know if you guys ran into this. My guild had this problem though this tier. Our warlock that's in is not the one that likes doing that stuff.
THD will never summon. He'll drop the stone, but he refuses to actually click it. He's one of those.
Man, we hate warlocks. This is
He's not wrong. You did your job. The stone is down.
He's never clicked a stone.
It's true that there have been at least 2 other people to have clicked after you started, so it makes sense for them to do the summoning. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, I guess, the limit org, and I think that's a huge. You know, it's incredible how much your guild is different now from a normal guild. You have these strategy people outside the raid, like you, Taggz. Also, Bubba was doing that this tier, and he's leaving for next tier. Have you guys got any thoughts about? So he was one of your outside like strategy consultants. That was really, I think, a huge part of what was going on there. How is all the outside strategy, outside weak or stuff developed, and do you have any plans to further iterate on that going forward? Obviously, I guess that's secret, so don't,
Well, I
don't
mean,
share future plans. But
no, yeah, finding someone like Bubba is really hard. It's pretty unique in terms of people that I've ever encountered in WoW. Also, for someone to be willing to do that sort of role. So there's definitely a very narrow cross section of people that can't even do that. That want to sit and watch a raid on the sideline the whole time, and also can provide as much valuable insight that in the way that Bubba did. And I guess for reference in what he was actually doing, because it was like behind the scenes, but Bubba was always the one usually saying, we should move lust here, we should pot on this, move this cooldown here, move that cooldown somewhere else. And then also when we were getting to new parts in a fight, he was usually focusing on initial positioning and strategy, which a lot of times gets tweaked mid pull, throughout progressing further. But he was always the one trying to focus on like, here's what we're going to do our first time in like P3 on generals. And what we ended up doing was just like freestyling, and that's how we got the 20% to 0 pull, is we just changed things on the fly and it worked. But yeah, that's like the role. And I mean, Bubba's like insanely smart, and he's like basically never wrong about stuff. Usually he's very reserved in terms of like, if he's potentially wrong, he's just not going to say anything, right? So he's always very, very sure about the input he's giving. So
he's somebody who like doesn't talk very much, but is usually right when he talks. Yeah,
exactly.
The anti-Tettles.
He's like, we played with a vid. Very, very similar mindset to the game. Takes a long time to take in information, and then once he's sure about what he wants to say, he'll say it.
So I guess that's one of the most impressive parts, because not only do you have Bubba Dub and players like that like you, Taggz, that are just outside the raid the whole tier but are still like fully committed to it, you also have a 34 person like raiding roster, and of that roster you've got players on there like Evade, like Cams, that are going to see 0 pulls in a certain tier because their spec isn't it, right? And yet they're still all in, ready, doing whatever they can to help and coming in next tier if their spec is better. And I don't know, I mean, how do you have so many people that just are okay being on the bench while also being so good? Because normally a characteristic of the good players is that they hate being on the bench, right?
Yeah, I think that is something I wanted to bring up as well, is like that dynamic. It's kind of always been a thing for our guild, like especially versus Echo and Method, is we've always kind of had a bigger roster than them. And additionally, using that bigger roster, we've always usually tried to, in the past more so, like class stack the early fights to just steamroll them. And one good example was actually BOD, the Jaina tier, where we class stacked the shit out of all the early bosses. We steamrolled them. We got to Jaina super, super quick. And then Method ended up beating us by a whole reset, even though they were much slower to Jaina. And a lot of that, a big part of that reason was that they were running basically the same comp, or very similar to what they actually ended up killing Jaina with the whole raid. So it makes it take it longer. And so we definitely lost Jaina because we didn't have like a Disc Priest. That was like the biggest wrench in there, but they also had like an eye level on us by the time they were killing Jaina.
Because all their mains had gotten all the gear from all the bosses on the way, even though that made the bosses take longer. Okay.
So, I mean, that's not like that. By no means do I mean that as an excuse, more so like an explanation of like, we did this wrong, we did that wrong, and that's why they beat us so hard, right? And so we don't want to make that same mistake, but we also still value the larger roster and the flexibility. And so kind of how that works now, and I think actually this newer gearing meta or system actually works better for us in this regard, in that we have those like leapfrogging warlocks and people just grinding on the bench. So if they do sit the whole tier, they're going to come back for Sire with more gear than everyone. And that's like what we plan for. That's what we basically have our guys on the bench doing from day one, right? I mean, it's no secret that that's how it's going to work. Although 34 is a bit big, I think we definitely have to trim. which is coming at some point. But
Yeah, sorry,
we definitely
Zyro.
want the larger. We definitely want the larger roster, for sure. I think we use it pretty well, and like mixing the flexibility without like throwing away too much gear is definitely the balancing act, right? And with raid gear reduced, it actually makes it easier for us, right? So we like that change for sure.
And to tack on that as well, I mean, yeah, the roster's huge and some people aren't going to see raid time, but the fact of the matter is, even though the roster's huge, like, everyone on the roster is an insane player. And if there's people on the bench that are upset that they're not in, you just have to look at the people that are in instead of them and be like, do you really think that you're that much better than the person that's in to where you should cause a fuss about it? And if so, they're probably not worth being in the guild because there's no room for that.
Dude, it seems so selfless. Like the whole entire like world first, like going for world first in general seems like such a selfless act. Like you have to be like fully committed to being benched the whole entire tier. If your spec or class is just not good, then there's not really a lot you can do about it. Sure, you can make multiple characters, but it seems like multiple characters are definitely worth a lot less now than they have been at least previously.
I mean, you gave the perfect example earlier. Evade is probably just one of the best Team 100 players in the world, but Havoc kind of didn't have a place this tier, so he didn't get any progression time. It's very weird.
All right, let's move on to our Q&A segment. But before we get there, we get to thank all of our supporters over on the Patreon. Happy New Year to all our Patreon supporters. Since we've had 2 weeks off, some of these names might be wrong, so just feel free to ping Tettles in the Discord if you need the name updated, because of course we have some funny names in here. So Patreon supporters are Paul Blart, Mawcop. Soulbinds are just an underdeveloped dating simulator. Oh shit, we forgot about Pride, aka our first 10 of the week. Delete DH is glad for all the Race to World First content. Grats to all the players, casters, devs, and media teams, and thanks for the hard work. Gopher. Hi, I'm Mac, and I'm a Balance Druid reroll because Melee is cursed this tier. True. King of Skills, Zuko, Ja, I Wish I Was Dratnos' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, The Marsh Hare, Regulus, Never Nude, Chewy. Acronyms will be back after Mythic to Nathria is down. Alright, I'm back to making funny names, but I haven't thought of anything yet, so you'll have to wait till next week. Sonara, Dazboot, Better Mage League than Tal, brought to you by Dratnos the Excel Wizard, Brad Ceratops, Gino the Boomer, Necris, Revdil, Shadowpriest can pump if you chain pull, just give him a chance, Nevuk, Sinmora, Eevee, Frosty K New Meta. I don't know about that one.
These are outdated.
Stevenson, an unnamed benefactor, Take Light of the Protector and Frenzied Regen off the GC. Dude, we gotta update that. Those spells literally don't exist anymore. Woe Bonesy No Verse, No Trick, I Scheduled a Tettle's Flame, Sire Denathria, Sire Dematicus. Okay, nice.
Ooh, pretty good.
Sean spent all of his time hyping up Guardian in beta just to become a Boomkin main. Guardian actually kind of sick though. Dude, some of those Guardian builds are so thick, so tanky. There's like several different great Guardian builds as well for M+. I think that spec is going to be really good, except for the fact it doesn't do any damage. Dymat, Syncope, Gamer Dad in Training, 40, Supra, Hanny is going to pump in Shadowlands, Nyx, My Brother Needs to Play More and Stop Being a Noob, Flick from Ascendance, Van Heelen is taking a break, Long Live Bubble 07, Gallic, Brusif, Chewy, Dratnos Rats Abyss, I'm Fired Up, be looking like McLovin.
Fact.
True. Revenol, Dabrowski, bring back Storming until Spiteful Shades don't lock us in combat for an extra 2 minutes per dungeon. Espace EU now recruiting, and Dabrowski. Wait, we got Dabrowski on here twice, Tettles.
Oh, yeah.
Trolling.
My bad. Trolling.
All right, Q&A time. Our first one comes from Cardinarch in Discord. Any chance we will talk about Trill's performance on Windwalker this tier? He seemed to have stolen the show with the overall performance and skill. Yeah, we saved this for now, but that was absolutely a storyline of this tier, was Trill on Windwalker. I think a lot of credit is going to Trill, deservedly so. I think he's very clearly an insane Windwalker player, but I think also Windwalker the spec deserves some love here. I think that it was one of those things when we're talking about over and undervalued specs where maybe there's not much room for Melee, obviously, and even though it might be doing more damage than Unholy, it doesn't bring an AMZ, right? But I don't know, if you guys could have, would you have prepped some more of those?
Possibly. I don't think so. Maybe?
Well, okay, so the reason we brought Trill is because we didn't bring a brewmaster. That was all.
Yeah.
Like this is all like we didn't. It wasn't. Hey, let's drop brewmaster. Oh, who can we find? Like it's all part of the conversation. In that, like comparing Ret and Prot and Holy and Mistweaver and Brewmaster and everything, because these are buffs. You need to bring one of them, right? So, we still don't really get the Brewmaster thing that like every guild had a Brewmaster. I mean, most guilds are running this Demon Hunter Brewmaster combo. They both bring raid buffs, so that makes sense to just fill that with your tanks. But we didn't think Brewmaster was good, and we wanted to do the same thing with a warrior, because we thought like Arms and Fury was bad, and it kind of was. With that buff, it definitely made warrior a bit more usable. But we were just thinking, like, do we really want to be stuck with an Arms warrior on every fight? Like, no, not really.
Yes.
So
the answer was yes, you did.
Yeah, so we ended up using double warrior a lot, where we did have an Arms warrior and a Prot warrior, which is good because the rally, you have 2 rallies then, right? It's not like bringing 2 monks. There's not really overlapping raid buff potential there. So yeah, Windwalker's definitely just a good class, but a huge part of that decision was just not using a Brewmaster, and we look at the other options. So we were in a way really weighing Windwalker versus Warrior, which is an easy choice to us. And that's kind of where that decision comes from. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely like, in our internal testing and just watching sims and how they changed with each patch, like Windwalker was good. I think Max will say we definitely should have brought more, but I don't know. I mean, Melee was kind of crowded already, so you'd probably be swapping like a DK for a Windwalker, which definitely might.
That's what I was going to say. I think you'd have to choose a DK to swap out, which is like DKs have the extra CDs that Windwalkers don't, so maybe not.
Yeah, well, you'd either lose a DK or the Arms Warrior pretty much in that situation. And if you can make that work, like losing the AMZ or the rally, it's probably worth it because the damage from Windwalker on most fights was pretty ridiculous. But I think it's pretty minimal because the raid CD is so useful from either Warrior or DK.
I will say on a lot of fights, 4 AMZs was more than enough.
Yeah.
You could definitely have gotten away with it. I can't recall. There was definitely some fights where you were using all 4 AMZs to the max. But yeah, definitely some of them you just had an extra one the whole time. So yeah, I mean, could have been done, but yeah, it was definitely mostly just a raid buff. Kind of like, I think Echo was planning on using a Ret, it looked like, instead of a Holy Pally. So just that's where a lot of the comp differences will come. Obviously, eventually they drop the Ret, but it's balancing of like, okay, we have to bring 1 Pally, which is the most valuable spec. Oh, we have to bring 1 Monk, which is the most valuable spec.
It's interesting. You're coming in with this checklist, and like, how good Arms is affects whether you can bring a Windwalker. How good like Holy Paladin is affects whether you can bring a Windwalker, because that like means that you're not gonna have the Ret or whatever, and that's an extra melee slot. And then like or like I don't know. It's so weird that you have all these 1-of slots that you fill like 12 of your roster with like people just bringing something from a checklist, and then you have like 8 spots where you're just stacking the best DPS.
Yes, that the remainder is just stack the only good, like the best one remaining that doesn't bring a buff, like DK,
Warlock, Mage, Hunter, whatever from those.
Hunters.
Yeah,
we almost had less Warlocks. It was very close. I think Xyro touched on it earlier. But like we almost had like one of our main Warlocks almost committed harder to Shadow Priest, which would have been weird. Xyro could have committed more to Mage, which would have been weird. Like stuff like that. Like we almost had 1 Warlock, which would have been weird.
I do think that like Gateway is also unique utility in the same vein, where it ends up being pretty good.
You definitely always want 1 Warlock, even like doing a raid on Mythic, like obviously summoning was broken.
But I mean, Healthstones are so big.
Summoning, Healthstones, Soulstone, everything. Like just literally in terms of time saved of progression. If you were doing a Mythic like progression raid without a Warlock, you're like a psycho.
Right, even if it adds like 15 pulls to the boss, it still cuts time off, right?
It's legitimately a raid buff sort of slot is the 1 Warlock at least.
All right, our next question comes from Mortia in Discord, who asks, do you think guilds like Pieces and BDGG seemingly putting more investment into Race to World First and then still being so far behind bodes poorly for competitive aspects of Race to World First? And will more guilds keep trying as the gap widens? This was definitely an interesting part of this tier, right? Because we had so many orgs running a Race to World First events this tier. I thought it was definitely great to see, but there is an interesting question here where, like, you know, 2 guilds killed Sire before any other guild had pulled it, right? And that, I don't know. I mean, I personally, I don't think it's a bad thing to have more people involved in Race to World First or anything. And I think Pieces had a pretty good tier. Their tier looked pretty good. But yeah, I mean, definitely the gap between Limit Echo and the field is apparent also.
I think that's just a consequence of general competition things, right? When there's 2 guilds that are heads and shoulders above the rest for the time being, people are going to want to go to those guilds rather than the guilds underneath them. But also, I think with the way the current landscape is, you know, both of the top 2 guilds, both Echo and Limit, have huge rosters and aren't really looking to recruit people. So if people are trying to get into the World First race, they're going to have to go through one of the other guilds first. So I think as time goes on, the competition will kind of get closer together. But yeah, there was a pretty big gap this year, and I think a lot of that was just prep stuff. And also a lot of these newer guilds like BDG, this was their first time going for World First.
Yeah, there's a huge practice element to it. Like, because we did this exact same thing, but 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, where our first year in Old Year, we did really bad. Like we were close to getting World First, but like our own self-assessment, we could list off 30 things we did poorly and bad, and we did this wrong and we did that wrong. And so, you know, we'll fix it for next year. And then you just iterate on that multiple times. But like, there's a lot of things that people have no idea about that it takes to like raid 15 hours a day for 2 weeks straight. Like, you don't just do it. Like, it's very tiring, and you have to manage, like, you know, people's sleep. That's like an actual important thing. Like we literally, the first time we went, I think people just weren't sleeping. They were like, we were stopping raid at midnight, and then Method would start streaming, and people were just sitting there watching Method stream till like 5 a.m. and they're like, oh shit, well, got to raid again in 3 hours. And like,
oh my
so
gosh, it's awful.
Yeah, so people were just doing their own thing, and like we're kind of miserable, like just super tired and like not playing that well. Like there's definitely so many factors that people don't really talk about that much, that you just have to kind of see to learn how to deal with it as a guild, right? And everyone will deal with these hurdles differently. So yeah, I mean, it was BGG's first year doing this. I think they did fine, right? And they can only do better next time, I think.
Yeah,
Because you just improve and fix those small issues and learn from it. And that's kind of where that gap is from, is that with Echo and us, it's been an arms race for the past 2 years, where both of our guilds are, even when Echo's or when Method was beating us, they were seeing, oh, they were really close, like we got to try even harder next time. Like when we did Old Year, I think that was probably definitely their reaction, was like, oh, they were close. That was closer than it's been in a while. And so for BOD, they just completely obliterated us, right? So, but then even still, from their perspective, they're like, okay, well, what do we do wrong? How can we improve for next time? And that's of course every guild, right? But for us, it's very more specifically compared between the two. Like everyone should try and everyone should try and improve every time, right? But with Echo and Limit, we've been comparing ourselves. Oh, what did they do well? We're just going to do that. Or like, what did we do wrong compared to them? That sort of thing. So even right now, a lot of our conversation and like strategy and stuff takes into account what they're doing, and or in terms of like what they can't do. Like the double Holy Pally thing, when we're kind of forcing it into certain bosses, part of that kind of calculation of what we were doing was that, well, we know Echo can't do this. They don't have 2 Holy Pallies. And so there's definitely a lot of looking back and forth. And when we're doing that, we're only looking at Echo, and they're only looking at us. So it's like a total ramping up arms race between us two that definitely, you know, separates everyone from the field. But like, there's no reason why, given more time, these other guilds can catch up. And I would expect them to, because there's only so so much we can optimize. I think at the moment, Echo and Limit are so incredibly close in terms of a lot of things with small differences, right? But there's only so much we can keep improving both guilds, right? So there's a ceiling where other guilds can definitely catch up, but it takes time.
I do also still think that some of the other guilds that are trying to contend are still getting owned by work shit that you guys. It even happened to you guys in Uldir and Bod, where people would just, I mean, it happened to Atlas this tier, but like to a lesser degree, it's just like, all right, sometimes you just stop raiding because somebody has to go to work.
Yeah, I mean, it happened to Method in Uldir as well.
Yeah,
their healing guy went back to work.
That's right. Holy shit. Yeah.
It's happened to us as well. I mean, me specifically. I didn't do Goon partly because I was doing like bigwigs timers, but also partly because my like return to work date was coming back up. So I returned to work on Tuesday, and they killed the boss on Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wasn't even around for the like the reclear, for example.
Yes, the old deer reclear that definitely happened. Yeah.
I wasn't around for the reclear that didn't happen. Yes.
Feels bad.
I think we did do heroic. We did do heroic. So there was some reclear ish.
Fair.
I wasn't making that up in my memory, but we were in the raid, but it was heroic.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the expansion is shaping up to be a spicy one for sure. I think that the competition between Complexity Limit and Echo is just going to keep being really tight and really fun to watch. And I think that there's like that kind of challenger tier where guilds are trying to break into that tier and then out of that tier as well at the top. So you got guilds like Pieces that are trying to break out of that tier, and you got guilds like Method that have clearly entered that tier as well this time around, with World 7th Sire that they just got today. So they're that was a really surprising outcome actually for that guild. I think for a lot of people, seeing them make that top 10 goal they'd set for themselves is definitely indicates that there's potential there too. So should be a fun expansion. I'm expecting that it'll continue to be between Limit and Echo at the top for next year, but I don't know. I mean, I could see any of these guilds making that kind of, turning on the gas and getting in there.
I think Peace as well. Pieces really? They said had 15 trials this tier. They had a little bit of a rebuild because they've been around, but they lost some players to Echo, I think, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think they probably have that list of things they did wrong. They'll fix them next time, but I think they're gonna come back really strong.
Fat Shark in 4th with half the rating hours of anybody else, and like their best player, a lot of their players getting yoinked by you guys as well coming into this tier, and they're still able to put up this world 4th.
Dude, I have the Fat Shark rating hours. I see them right here. So week 1 they rated 46 hours. Week 2 they're rated 44, and week 3 they rated 7.
Okay, yeah. So that's they rated as much as like Limited Echo did in 1 week across all 3 of their weeks.
Yeah, if that guild ever decides they actually want to go for world first, they're going to be really good at that too once they kick off the dust we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? Because like that guild is just like all the best players that don't want to raid 24/7, right?
Right, exactly.
So you can't just like turn those players into players that want to raid 24/7.
Yeah,
you become like a destination being the top guild of a certain time bracket, which sometimes gets memed on. People are like, "Oh, we're the number 1 week a night guild that starts with the letter H," like stuff like that. But there's definitely like some prime real estate being the number 1 guild, especially like at Fat Shark's level. I mean, they're the number 1 guild that does day raid. That's a pretty broad category, right? And it definitely pays to be that. Like we were in that position leading up to Uldir. We were world 5th, world 7th. I don't remember. A couple of those ranks definitely happened, and we weren't day raiding, and that's why it made the jump for us a lot easier because we had just a really good roster when we did that. Yeah, I think Fat Shark definitely could. They're awesome. I just don't think they will.
I mean, Pieces was battling with Fat Shark for literally the longest time. Those two were like neck and neck for always, like every single tier. And then Pieces made the jump to like day rating, so it definitely can and has happened in the past.
Yeah,
it's true.
it's definitely, I don't know, it's always just impressive to see. There's so much impressive stuff coming out from like each guild has their own way that they're doing something really cool. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be a great expansion. I congratulate you two once again on a very incredible world first and great tier. And I'm looking forward to the next raid. I think that we're in for a treat here for fans of the Race to World First.
For sure, this expansion owns.
Yep, it's exceeded all my expectations so far too.
All right, that's gonna.
I think it's always
Okay.
before you say goodbye. I think it's always really good to hear the perspectives of the limit players themselves, of like not the gameplay stuff, but the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. Like the time management alone outside of the game, I think is so important beyond belief. Like making people go to bed and not watching other streams is actually so big. Stuff like that's really nice to hear. So appreciate the input, guys.
Oh yeah, actually, one more thing. We turned that up to like even more so this time. We made everyone start going to bed like 2 weeks before. We started having 9 a.m.
Yeah, I saw that.
We did meetings at like 9 a.m. and we also did like Moss split runs at 9 a.m. for people just to wake up.
Which was so good because the raid came out at 3 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
Love
worked
that.
out. Yeah.
You just gotta wake up as well. You gotta just wake up and be sitting in front of that loading screen because, you know, that's when your sleep schedule is. That was wild. Anyways, that will be the end of our show this week. Thanks so much for joining us, Taggz and Xyronic. Zyro, where can people find you? Do you have a Twitch perhaps to plug?
Yeah. Twitch.tv/Xyronic or Twitter at Limit Xyronic.
And how about you, Taggz?
No, not really.
Okay.
I don't have
Taggz, impossible to be found. You'll find him again behind the scenes next Race to World First, perhaps. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will be back next time.
And we will be back next week with another show. Bye.
Bye.